Hello, class. My name is Cassandra Benavides, and I will be talking about measuring intelligence in infants and young children. Mental measurements continue to be a favorite topic within educators. Measuring intelligence is something that I think everybody in the world tries to do, tries to see how smart they are, um, to see how intelligent they are. And everyone's always taking IQ exams, whether it be fake ones or real ones. Um, what is intelligence? Cohen and Swirlick define intelligence as a construct of capacity that manifests itself in different ways. Intelligence can be measured by the ability to acquire and apply knowledge, reason logically, plan effectively, infer perceptively, grasp and visualize concepts, pay attention, be intuitive, solve problems, and make good judgments. So basically, anything that has anything to do with mental capacity, understanding, abstract thought, communication, learning, and retainment. All of these are different constructs that are defined as intelligence. Um, there's an importance in measuring intelligence in children, and this is because from a young age we want to make sure that children are getting the proper education. A lot of kids are not at the right grade level or are not mentally capable of understanding what is being taught to them in their courses. So the importance of measuring intelligence in children includes the ability to identify children with learning disabilities, identify children with intellectual disabilities, formerly known as retardation, appropriately place children in classes that will allow them to learn at a pace that is comfortable for them, assess the retainment level of information in school classes, and allow the test administrator to identify strengths and weaknesses on intellectual abilities. These are all important in the proper advancement in education in all children. Intelligence in schools. Intelligence in schools is measured with three different factors: the advancement in school grades, the quality of work the child is doing in the grade that he's enrolled, and the extent to which he is regarded by the teacher as intelligent. For example, a student can be in third grade, but his mental capabilities are not grasping all the concepts of the third grade. Therefore, an intelligence test would be advised for the student to make sure that he's in the proper grade level, or to see if different education is needed for him to catch up to people of his grade level. Procedures in schools are in place so that each child can develop themselves not only intellectually, but physically, socially, and emotionally. Eventually, these are all put together and help construct the intelligence of a student. The use of intelligence tests are often urged because they can allow the proper assessment, estimating vocational fitness. These are often deemed as necessity for grade school for the same fact that we want these students to be getting the proper education, and if their mental capabilities are not apt to observing and taking in all this information that's being given to them, then maybe they're not learning to their full potential. Some of the examples of intelligence tests in schools would be standardized testing and tests that measure the abilities of the child versus the abilities that should be learned at the same age. My son was recently given, or in some formal way administered, a test where they were basically, in essence, they were comparing what a 3-year-old should be doing at his age and what my son was doing at his age. They came to the conclusion that my son was a little bit behind, and so it needed to have some type of therapy, vocational, behavioral, speech, because he wasn't fully grasping all of the things that were being taught at his daycare, and therefore he was not learning and he was actually becoming disruptive. Different tests that measure intelligence. There's quite a bit of them, to be honest. There are different tests for different age groups. So in this section, I'm just going to be discussing the tests which are administered to children. Woodcock-Johnson 3 test of cognitive abilities is used for ages between 2 to 90, so between children and adults of all ages, really. Differential ability scales is used in ages between 2.5 years and 17 years of age. The Binet-Simon scale, which is one of the more common scales used, is used in ages between 2 and 85. The Universal Nonverbal Intelligence is used in ages between 5 and 17 years of age. And the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, which is one of the other common exams or tests for children, and is used between the ages of 6 and 17 years old. The first instance of use for intelligence testing came when Alfred Binet first used a test of intelligence. His group was asked to create an assessment or a test which allowed the identification of children who needed alternative education. This task came from a French group because they were not sure if some of their students were grasping full on the information that was needed, and they wanted to see if these students needed extra education aside from what they were taking in order to enhance their mental capabilities. The Binet-Simon scale, sometimes also known as the Stanford-Binet scale, put together a variety of tasks they believed were indicative of abilities children tend to have at different stages. Basically, this test changes depending on the age, but is always analyzed to make sure that the test continues to stay valid. For them to compromise these abilities, they had to study and identify them for many years. This test assesses abilities in 5 basic areas. They include fluid reasoning, knowledge, quantitative reasoning, visual spatial processing, and working memory. They developed this test because they believed that intelligence was learned and not inherited. So they believed that it's not something that we were born with. It's something that as we went through time, we were able to obtain different information. The Binet-Simon scale consists of 56 tasks that have been modified for the capabilities of children at different stages. The test consists of different constructs, really, but the test has been changed and revised a couple times since it was first developed. The common versions include the year 1905 and the year 1908. As you can see here, in the year 1905, they had more complex tasks. They had to reply to an abstract, the repetition of 3 figures with immediate repetition of 3 figures. Definition of abstract terms, verbal definition of known objects, and the resemblance of several known objects given from memory. The 1905 scale or constructs really led to the conclusion that intelligence was more of a memory than something that you learned. They're just saying nowadays it says that in schools or tests, they're not testing your intelligence, they're just testing your memory. Basically, how well you remembered what you learned or what you know. But yeah. In the 1908 version, they were basically just asked to look at unfinished pictures, answer comprehension questions, definition of familiar objects, and making change from money and French currency. Eventually, this was adapted to whichever currency was the one that was taking the test. For example, if the test was being administered in the US, then they would be making change from US dollars or US coins. etc. Different ages require different questions. Here are some examples of some of the different questions that were asked at different ages. The ages that I decided to speak about were the ages of 3, 5, and 8. At age 3, they ask you questions like, where's your nose, where's your eyes and mouth, repetition of sentences, repetition of numbers, describing pictures, and name of family. That sounds pretty similar to the exam that my son was given. They asked him where certain parts of his bodies were. They asked him what his name was. They asked him to draw a circle or to draw a straight line. So these are some things that he was not capable of doing. At age 5, they ask you to compare weights, copy a square, make a rectangle with divided cards, and counting up to 4 cents. I think could be increased a little bit more. At age 8, they want to make sure that you can read and report what you read, that you are able to count money, name different colors, count backwards, write as you are being dictated a sentence, and comparing objects from memory. The qualification scales. The score of a child is based on his or her composite score across various tests. The emphasis here is on quantity of tests. Binet believed that one could not make solid conclusions about intelligence by only looking at how children score on one test. Binet, he hypothesized, or he recommended that these tests be taken again a year after year and adapted, obviously, for the different age groups, but somehow always refer back to the first test to make sure that the test is still being valid, and then they could see what the difference is, if it changes or not, or if it stays consistent. The levels of classification, an average child would be when a mental age matches their chronological age. The advanced child would be when their mental capacity is higher than that of their chronological age. And intellectually challenged is when their mental age is lower than their chronological age. In my son's case, they would consider him intellectually challenged at the moment because he is lower than where he should be. There are some issues that concern intelligence testing. There could be a lot of misuse of the test. It's very often where these tests are not used in a correct fashion, and also the test scores are not read properly or not being scored properly. Another issue is that when tests are given to certain children that have societal issues, they're not aware of the language or the vocabulary that's being used, and so they don't understand what's being asked of them. It doesn't mean they're not intelligent, it just means they were not taught this information. And there's concerns that they're not measuring intelligence rather than memory. And that pretty much concludes my presentation. I think that intelligence is something that we should definitely be it should definitely be something that we would want to study, just because if we can in any way enhance our intelligence or enhance our children's intelligences anyway, it would definitely be something worth looking into, as well as making sure that our students or that our children are in the proper grades, that they're taking, that their brains are working at the capabilities that are good for them. Nobody wants their children to fall behind because they're not mentally grasping the information that's being given to them, because their brains are just not capable of doing so. So anything that we can do in order to help these children advance and increase their mental capabilities, I think is something definitely worth looking into. There are other tests that there are other tests that study this construct of intelligence, but I decided to speak a little bit more about the Binet-Simon scale. Thank you.